Hi there, Malcolm here with my 194th Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you my May Wrap-Up and June TBR. I think it's the 18th of June today, so I need to really get a move on with these videos. Mind it's the editing that takes forever. Anyway, in the month of May I managed 11 books, totalling 2,098 pages, which puts me 2,427 pages up on the previous year. Which is fantastic, particularly when you take into account that I counted audibles I listened to last year as pages, and this year I am not. I'm just counting them as minutes, in which case I managed 50.5 hours. So with 11 titles to get through and a TBR for June, which I've possibly mostly read already, there's a lot to get on with, so let's get cracking. First up is my book of the month, Among the Living by Tim Lebbon, a horror zombie type story. I have done an individual review of this one, so I'll leave a link to that down below if you want to know what I thought of this. And after that I then moved on to The Simpsons Comics Unchained. This is a really beefy one with 7 collected comics in it. So we have The Geeks Shall Inherit the Earth. I've just flipped through it and I don't recall what this is about at all, apart from Homer Simpson adopting the 3 geeks who get kicked out of university. Basically they've already graduated, they can't live there anymore. But clearly quite forgettable. The Absent-Minded Protester. But basically Grandpa joins bar in tagging his graffiti all over Springfield. Dollards to Donuts, where Mr. Burns provides extremely addictive donuts to the population of Springfield. Sense and Sensorability. It's quite a good one and quite relevant really, with Homer getting hold of some alternate comics, sharing them, and the Censor Brigade go into overdrive. And then there's Sideshow Simpsons, where after accidentally injuring Krusty, he blackmails the family into being his sideshow minions while he films from their house. All of this to avoid the mob. Bart Simpson and the Krusty Band Fun Factory. Something about Matt Groening, he loves doing lampoons of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I know we've got one version of the TV show, and he's done one from Futurama as well. He won't stop poking that bear though. And The Homer Show, which basically the Simpsons do The Truman Show, where Homer is the 24/7 entertainment to anybody who wants to watch him. He doesn't know it, but everyone else does and wants in on the action, thereby reducing the popularity and entertainment value of the show. Yeah, a really good collection here. There's a few extra stories in here as well. Not as much bonus material as there has been in other collections, but yeah, there's a good wad of stuff in here worth buying. And after that I then finished listening to Lord of the Rings Part 3, The Return of the King by J.R. Tolkien, read by Andy Serkis. And it basically chronicles the final confrontation between good and evil in Middle-earth as Frodo, Sam and Gollum get to Mount Doom and dispense of some jewellery, and Aragorn becomes king, marries an elvish princess. And surprisingly, the high point for me was the scouring of the Shire, the act that was controversially removed by Peter Jackson for the films. And presumably they'd been through enough by this point, but no, the hobbits get back to the Shire to find it under the thumb of a sinister being and bad men, and so the hobbits, this time on their own, have to gather the hobbiting forces and overthrow the bad stuff that's going on there. A top-notch section of the story and rounds it off nicely. And as much as I do enjoy the films an awful lot and don't miss Tom Bombadil at all, the scouring of the Shire was a misstep not to include. However, the story finishes about 2/3 of the way through the Audible, and we then get Andy Serkis read us the first few chunks of the appendices at the end, basically about lineages, some histories, what happens next with certain characters, and it's vaguely interesting for some of it, quite interesting for others, but it's a bit depressing when you finish a story and there's still quite a few hours left to go and it's all just appendices. But thankfully he doesn't read out all the appendices from the actual written word. A lot of it is about the language and the script, which would have been dire to have sat through and listened to. But all in all, really good. I think the third installment makes a more coherent story than the second one, which really does divide book 1 and book 2 to these characters doing this thing for the half book, and then for the second half we have these characters doing this thing, whereas we have a more continual story feel for this installment. Booktastic, but I don't think as strong as the last one. And Andy Serkis did a bang-up job reading it. And after that I then read Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the second book of the Children of Time trilogy. In the first book we have superintelligent spiders getting in the way of humanity. In this one, the spiders and the humanity go off to find another terraforming project to find superintelligent octopuses already there, as well as something else. This does a wonderful job of doing a two-pronged approach to telling the story. One from the original colonisers and what happens with them, and the discovery of this something else, and the arrival of the exploratory forces as they encounter these super intelligent octopuses and this something else. And I found the encounter on the space station really reminiscent of the Calcinites from XCOM Terror from the Deep, and potentially not a bad analogy in a way. Really interesting, really enjoyed it. I don't think it flowed quite as well as book 1 did, and I don't think it's accessible as book 1 in terms of casual sci-fi readers. Book 1 is really easy to read. This one was a little bit harder, but I really enjoyed it. Some really fun ideas in here, and he really enjoys playing with the differences in communication by so many different ways. In the first book we had problems with humans who communicate through sound and vision, communicating with spiders who communicate through vibrations and thumps. We now come across octopuses who communicate through colour patterns, as they are able to change their skin tone to all sorts of wonderful flashes and colours. And of course, getting these 3 species to communicate with each other is a real headache. Really enjoyed that aspect. Booktastic. And after that, I then read The 3-Body Problem. I listened to this on Audible. Started off with my wife for most of it. And I have done an individual video about this one, because just saying I hated it isn't sufficient. So there's a link down below to explain what I didn't like about this one. Go check that out. And after that, I then read Alien Sea of Sorrows by James A. Moore. This is book 2 of the new-ish Alien trilogy tied into the original Alien and Aliens films. Book 1, Out of the Shadows, took place between Alien and Aliens. This one is a few generations later, following a descendant of Ellen Ripley, as he's on a planet and telepathically linked to the aliens under the surface that he doesn't even know are there yet and has never even heard of. And again, this does a really good job of doing something different with the aliens genre. And yes, we do end up with a whole bunch of armed marines going in, and again, not really knowing what they're going in for, but it plays out very differently to Aliens or anything else I've seen with marines facing down hordes of alien bugs. And I really enjoyed it. The main character plays a really good reluctant hero. Well, basically he's kidnapped and forced to do it, so it's not even reluctant. It's he's there, he gets no choices being there. And there's action going on several levels, on the surface, on the underground, in several spots as well. So we don't just follow one character. We do jump around a little bit just to see the extent of the situation. You'd thought everything Alien had been done by now, but no, we still get some new material. Didn't feel like a rehash at all. Worth buying. And then after that, I then finished reading Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis to my wife. This is a gentle sci-fi story set in a space hotel, where each chapter we follow a different character. I think we only have one repeat, which is the introductory character at the end as well. But we go from character to character as we see why they came to work on this hotel in the first place. Generally, they've run away from something for some reason. But also there's a mystery going on as well. There's a strange signal that's being received and some individuals are tasked with deciphering it. There's an anti-establishment newsletter that goes out revealing secrets about the Empire, the Emperor, with some very candid inside knowledge about it all, and their agents trying to track down the perpetrator to stop them revealing all this stuff, and that they're believed to be on the ship somewhere. So there's a little bit of mystery, but it's more about the characters. This is very much a character-driven story. As each chapter, we jump from one character to the next as we learn about them, why they're there, and how they fit into the hotel life. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did spend most of the book thinking, well, where's this going to go? The ending does somewhat answer the questions. I'm not sure entirely to my liking, but yeah, it was fine. It's a very gentle one. And again, one of those books that you can give to a non-sci-fi person saying, you know, you could read this. Yes, it's sci-fi, but it's not really. It's more about people. And the human people as well. There's no aliens, there's no robots, there's no synthetic beings, no super intelligent cats. No, just people and an overbearing, authoritative empire. Yeah, we both really enjoyed it. I would say worth buying. And it's got nice sprayed edges as well, this version. And after that, I then listened to The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, read to me by George Wilson. This is a reread. I read this when I was about 15, I reckon. And a wonderful story about the futility of war. And we follow a character by the name of Mandela as he's sent out as a trooper to fight against an alien race. And this is very much a catharsis book by the author who went and fought in the Vietnam War. Now, Mandela is a very likeable character. The Writing style is very easy to enjoy. It's also quite humorous in a lot of places, but as it is a war book, it is also quite harrowing in others. And we literally follow him as he goes through the training and then the fighting and then trying to reintegrate back into civilian life, but with the problem being that the fighting took place in a vastly remote planet, and in the time dilation that takes place going out there fighting and coming back again, decades have passed on Earth. His elderly mother is all that's left, and even then she's not there for very long, and the world has moved on. Attitudes have changed, and of course he ends up re-enlisting because he can't cope with being an outsider in his own place. And of course that goes off and fights again, this time as an officer. But each time the war sort of goes forwards and skips and jumps technologically. In one encounter the aliens are quite behind technologically, and in the next they're far more advanced, as decades have passed while they're in transit, meaning that the technology of their opponents can be anywhere from ahead or behind, or somewhere in between. Exciting, moving, emotional, funny, shocking, absolutely wonderful book. Really enjoyed listening to this again. I think it was narrated really well as well. Booktastic. Can't recommend this one enough. And after that I listened to The Kraken Wakes. This is by John Wyndham and read by John Sackville. It's starting is very similar in style to The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, with things landing on Earth. But this time they're landing in the water where the deep trenches are. Every ocean gets one, but only where it's really, really deep. After certain months of these things landing, it's clear that there's now something living down in these trenches that isn't willing to put up with humanity on the surface. And this was a really fascinating insight into the human condition, into the international political condition, because the Americans start blaming the Russians start blaming the Americans, and the two nearly come to blows. And even in the face of evidence that there is some alien being down there doing these things, politically it makes more sense to go and fight the Russians than it is to accept the fact that there's an extraterrestrial entity living deep underwater. So I found that really fascinating and entirely believable. It's a sort of stupid thing that our politicians would actually do. And when the alien incursions do start targeting islands and port areas, there was again the sense of a War of the Worlds style interaction to a degree. It's played out very differently, but there are similarities. And again, humans are too busy pointing fingers at each other rather than dealing with the problem. Yeah, absolutely love this one. I don't know why this story is not talked about more, which takes some very interesting surprise twists and turns. And the characters that we follow, who both work for the English Broadcasting Corporation, the EBC, not the BBC, the EBC, as they try and cover as much of the story as it unfolds. And it's their telling that tells us what's happening, and their various interviews with scientists and military men who are in the know. It's a very interesting way of telling the story. Absolutely loved it. Really recommend this one. Booktastic. After that I then read Simpsons Madness, 6 More Tales, Journey to the Centre of the Quickie Mart. There's a fantastic story which starts at the end with this fun image. And it's then, 5 minutes earlier, 10 minutes earlier, 5 minutes earlier type story where we go back and just find out the series of circumstances that led to them being in that situation. Really enjoyed that one. The Prime of Miss Lisa Simpson. Bart somehow gets all the teachers deported, and it's left to the brainy children of Springfield Elementary to teach the rest of the class, and it goes about as well as one would expect. Hamburger's Little Helper. During a commercial skit, Krusty is bitten on the bum by Santa's Little Helper, which instantly makes the dog a star and a constant feature in all the ongoing Krusty Burger commercials. Angels with Yellow Faces. Sideshow Bob gets released from prison and tries going straight, realises it's futile, and starts a club teaching the delinquents of Springfield how to be criminals better, and Bart joins, ostensibly as an undercover agent, but he's far too good. The Rise and Fall of Bartholomew J. Simpson. This is a future Simpsons episode where everyone's grown up, and Bart is needing some drastic surgery to replace various organs, and his only words to his sister is fish sticks, leading her to go and interview various now elderly Springfieldians to find out just what happened and what's with these fish sticks. Yeah, really enjoyed that one. I like the future Simpsons stories. And Tic Tac Doe. Homer Simpson ends up on a dating game show owned by Mr. Burns, much to Marge's huge disapproval, and so he takes the alternative option, which is some death escape room where there is no escape. So yeah, 6 more fun tales with some extra bonus content as well, worth buying. And after that I then listened to Foul Play Suspected, again by John Wyndham. And although classed as a sci-fi, this is more of just a crime mystery. A woman's husband dies and she returns, so she returns home to find her professor father missing. The house locked up, the car's still in the garage, no one knows where he is, and he's been missing for quite a few months. So she contacts her cousin who's in the area, and an investigation starts as they try and work out just where he's gone. She's abruptly kidnapped. It turns out he's been researching something that some people want. We're not quite sure if it's a rival or organisation. Yeah, so quite an intriguing mystery thriller with some fun twists and turns and a pretty grim revelation. Felt very much like one of the Tintin adventures, like when Calculus goes missing. Now, set in a very similar sort of time period and with those type of thugs. I would say it's worth buying. It's very different to other John Wyndham stories. I think putting it under the title of science fiction was a little bit misleading perhaps, but it does open up the possibilities of what has happened to this professor as you're sat there guessing, well, has he run away? Has he been kidnapped? Has he used a time-travelling toaster to go back in time? You know, within the science fiction parameters, anything could have happened to him. Yeah, worth buying. And there we go, that was all my reading with my eyes and my ears for May. What have I got in line for June? So my book of the month is Breathe by Sarah Crossman. I spotted this in the Oxfam bookshop a while ago. Quite like the look of it. Quite fancy cover. Thought I'd give it a go. And in a similar sort of vein to the Doctor Who episode Oxygen, air is now a priceless commodity. There are no trees left in the world and everyone has to live under domes. And of course you have the rich who have access to the nice, fresh, healthy air, and there are lots of trees and grasses in their area, and the poor who live in less green areas where the air is bottled and they're not allowed to run or do any strenuous exercise because they're using up more oxygen than they're allowed to, and they'll get taxed for any excesses. So as an idea, really intriguing. And of course, like with all these sort of bubble stories, people under a dome or in a silo, there's a conspiracy somehow. And we follow a few characters. One's part of the revolution, one's from a poorer area, and one's from a wealthy area. And the three just find out how much the world around them isn't what it seems to be, and the people that they call friends and family aren't who they appear to be either. Really intriguing. And once I read that, I'll then move on to finishing Old Venus, short story collection edited by George R. R. Martin and Gardner Dozois. A bunch of stories about Venus back in the romantic days before we sent probes out and found how much of a death trap it really is. What if Venus was hot and wet and with dinosaurs and could be lived on? But they might have indigenous people there or they might not. But we can go there and live on it and scrape out some sort of living, sometimes with air tanks or sometimes just breathing the fresh air as it is. Some really intriguing ideas in this, but huge book. Hope to finish it in the month of June. And if I do, I'll then move on to Star Wars Clone Wars Gambit Stealth by Karen Miller. Now, I had the intention last month of reading this in between the stories of Old Venus, because I found you can't just read a short story collection in one go. You've got to stop, think about what you've been reading before you move on to a completely different story. And so I'd reread this in between, but that didn't happen quite so much like that. And in this one, it's set in the Clone Wars TV show, where Anakin and Obi-Wan have to go to a planet undercover to find out what the Separatists are up to. And having read the blurb, they look like they're developing some form of bioweapon. And so they're going to have to try and stop that, obviously. And after that, I'll then move on to the Star Wars Young Jedi Knights series, starting with Heirs of the Empire. And these are by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Mester. I have a whole bunch of these down here. I haven't quite got them all, but I do intend to try and read as many of them as I can. I do intend to try and read them all, but I might intersperse other books in between them, otherwise I'll just not get anything on my TBR read. On Audible, I'm just going through the classic sci-fis that are free, and certainly seeming to be going through the John Wyndham selection, so we'll see what I'll do next on that. And to my wife, I'm reading Ailing Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky. We have the Ark. Earth is run by a mandate which has a very tight orthodox regime about what science can and can't say, and one man, amongst others, goes beyond the parameters of what's been acceptable and gets sent to the planet of Kiln which seems to sport some ruins from a vanished intelligent life. Where's it gone? And is the life that's there any clue? Really enjoying it so far. Very different to the Children of Earth series. And I'm also going to try and get through my Simpsons graphic novels. I've still got a fair few to go, starting with Belly Buster. Oh, there you have it. A lot of books there. Feel free to comment down below what you liked, what you didn't like, what you're curious about, what you just don't give one damn about whatsoever. As usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep it to yourself. Thank you. Have a great reading time and see you later.